Hey Podcast Babe, welcome to season 9 of the Podcast Babes podcast. My name is Anna Klasse, host of this pod and founder of the Podcast Babes. Every week, I interview and inspire a female podcaster here who has made her podcast work for her and her business. So tune in to learn from her mistakes, create your own profitable podcast. Here's today's episode. Hey Podcast Babes, welcome to a new episode. Today I'm here with Heidi Thompson. She is the best-selling author of Clone Your Best Clients, and she is a wedding business coach and marketing strategist. Her business is called Evolve Your Wedding Business, and that's also what her podcast is called. So she's also a podcast host. I'm really excited to have you on the show today, Heidi. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about your business as a wedding business coach?
Yeah, so I had previously worked in the industry and I had also previously worked in marketing. So this business, which I started in 2012, is kind of like those worlds colliding. When I was running wedding shows, I was finding I was having to really help the vendors that were taking part make the most of it and get more out of their marketing. And I realized not everyone is just into marketing. So that's something I could help wedding professionals with. So for the past 12 years, I have been working with wedding professionals of all different kinds. So planners, venues, videographers, photographers, you name it, to help them attract and book more of the clients that they want to be working with and help them build a business that gives them freedom and flexibility. Because in our industry, especially, it's very easy to get swept into these like 60+ hour weeks and for that to become the norm. And nobody started their business for that to be, the goal. So I like to have the balance between, yes, we want the bookings. Yes, you want to be working with people you want to be working with, but we also don't want it to be where it just sucks up all of your time.
Yeah, I can absolutely imagine because I can imagine the wedding business to be very seasonal, right? There's definitely a wedding season where it must be absolutely crazy, and then a low season where there might be not that much going on. And yeah, I guess striking a balance in that must be a challenge that you have in your industry for sure. Can you also tell me a little bit more about your podcast?
Yeah. So I started my podcast and I want to say like 2014 or 2015. It's
Wow.
been
Yeah.
forever. And with it, I wanted to address everything on the business side of the wedding business. So it's not about teaching photographers to be better photographers. It's about teaching wedding professionals to create businesses that serve them. So we cover things like sales, we cover marketing, we cover productivity and time related topics. We cover things that are a little bit broader too, like money and managing cash flow, because all of those things come in to the whole of, running your business. So it's been quite a while now, and it's a mix of interview episodes and solo episodes. And I love it. I absolutely love doing it. It's one of my favorite things I get to do.
Very cool. Amazing. So 2014, 2015, that's a while ago, like you said, but it was
Right.
also quite early for a podcast, right? Back then, there
Yeah.
were not that many podcasts around. So, what sparked this idea of starting a podcast for you? What made you think that that was the move for you and got you started with this project?
I think part of it is at the time I was consuming a lot of podcasts and I saw that there was an opportunity because there wasn't as much going on in the space. Not to say that there's not an opportunity now, there absolutely is. But I saw it as a really good fit with, what was going on at the time, but also I felt like it did a couple of things for me. It suited my strengths. I really love teaching. That's a huge component in my business, and it allows me to do that. It also allows me to use it to build relationships with guests And it's a nice big piece of content that can be repurposed in a bunch of different ways. So it really does serve so many different parts of the business that really no other type of content creation does.
Yeah, very cool. So, how did you get started once you decided that this is the way to go for you and that it will be beneficial for your business?
Oh boy. So I found some really, really old tutorials on like how does this whole recording audio thing even work? I was working on, I think, like my 2008 or 2009 MacBook at the time. I think when I started, I didn't even have like a proper microphone. I think I was using like one of the headset ones that was really popular at the time. But basically, my mentality with it was like, it's not gonna be perfect. It's not gonna be perfect audio. It's not gonna be this perfect thing because I'm new to it. I'm learning, I'm figuring it out. And as long as it's useful to somebody, that's all I really care about. I don't need it to be this absolutely perfect thing. That's not the function of it. So once I figured out like some basic tech things, which we can talk about if you'd like, because that really hasn't actually changed that much, to be honest, was just kind of crazy. I went into looking at, okay, who would my audience love to learn from and on what particular topics? And I started inviting people on. I started just doing straight interviews for the first several, like I think a lot of people do, because it's like, no one wants to hear from just me. I want to bring other people in and have these conversations that people wish that they could have. So that is really how it started. And then it kind of went from there.
Yeah, cool. So, at what point did you decide to also do solo episodes? Because now you mentioned that it is a mix between interviews and solo episodes. Was that something that your audience really requested, or was that something that you decided to just try out and see how it went along the way?
It's something I wanted to do from a strategic perspective. I don't remember exactly when I started doing it, but I realized that if part of this podcast was to sell someone wanting to work with me, I needed to give them me. I needed to
Yeah.
give them, my expertise. I needed to give them, an example of what it would be like to learn from me. And I have definitely found that having those, people feel like they know me very well when they do decide to come work with me. It's kind of funny. It's like they're coming to me feeling like they know me. And I'm like, hi, this is the first time I've ever spoken to you, but you apparently know everything about me. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so weird, right? That's you don't know anything about them and they sometimes know so much about you. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
definitely had that too. But as a business owner, it's perfect if that happens on sales calls, right?
Yeah.
Because the selling had been done before when these people were listening to these podcast episodes and they got to meet you there and learn a little bit about you and your personality and your teaching style as well. And yeah, I think a mix of interviews and solo episodes works very well for many business owners. Just wanted to share that in my experience, if you don't want to do solo episodes, I think there is another way to do it. And you can have an interview style that shows more or less about of your personality. So if it's more conversational or you would share your own perspectives a lot throughout the interviews as well, that's also a way to do it. So just, if you're listening and you're like, "Oh no, I need to do solo episodes." Ugh. You don't have to, right? And also, I think Heidi, how you did it, that you started with interview episodes because that's what you were excited about. And then later those solo episodes came in. I think that's also an excellent way to do it actually.
Yeah. And I think too, like, obviously, solo episodes in general are going to be much shorter because there's not a conversation. Like, you can make such an impactful solo episode that does something for someone that makes a change for them in under 10 minutes. Like, it doesn't have to be this gigantic thing, this gigantic production. I think a lot of people get hung up on that. It's just if you sat down to record, here are 3 mistakes I see whatever your audience is making, and here's how I would address those. Like, that's so helpful. And it doesn't have to be this, hour long deep dive into absolutely everything you know about the topic.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be very easy, like you said, if it's not a big production, but also you don't have to schedule this recording session with anyone, right? You can just hop on the mic whenever works for you, late at night, early in the morning, you know, in your lunch break, doesn't really matter because there's no one else on the other end of the mic. So you can be a little bit more flexible with recording as well, especially batch recording is pretty easy that way as well. Yeah, cool. So I think that's already really interesting. What else have you learned, or did you make any big changes in the past, what is it, 9
Forever.
years of podcasting?
I know. Like, that can't be right. Yeah. So I actually moved to batch recording. Funny enough, I do the opposite of what you just said. So I batch record interviews because I know the people I want to have on. I know the topics I want to have them on, and they are really evergreen sorts of things. So it's nothing that's going to make a difference whether it goes out today or in 3 months or in 6 months. So I tend to do my interviews over a 2 week span, and when people approach me and they say they want to be on the podcast, I just kind of put that in a folder in my inbox and say, okay, I record in batches. I'll come back to you and let you know. I send a scheduling link out to everybody I want to have. I get them scheduled and I just like crank out those interview recordings. For the solo episodes, I tend to do them more on the fly, and I tend to do them more on something that I see that's happening at the moment. So more of a pressing issue. There are times when I'm at least like planning the topics ahead of time. Like, I know I want to cover this specific topic, so I'm going to record something about it, but I don't have it like so tightly put together. I'm usually going into that with more of kind of an outline of the bullet points that I want to hit, the points that I want to make. And I found that balance of like having a bunch of interviews in the bank that I can pull from, and then also giving myself the flexibility to record solo episodes as close to the release date as I want to, has been really great for me. I like to have that kind of balance. I love having stuff done and ready to go and in my back pocket, but there is also something really nice about having the ability to recognize something and be like, man, I keep hearing this from clients. Okay, I'm going to record an episode about it and it's going to go out next week or something like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think hitting that balance between recording in advance but not too far in advance. I mean, I've definitely had this where people pitched me to come on my podcast and I had to say, well, I'm happy to have you, but it won't release for another 6 to 8 months. Which
Same
was kind
here,
of
same
silly
here.
at some point, right? It's like so yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think it's good to hear that that now works so well for you, that you found that balance of having interviews done because you don't have to schedule with anyone. If people get sick or have to reschedule, no problem because you have those batch recorded. There's no panic for interviews at any time. But then those solo episodes, you give yourself the flexibility. That sounds like a really good idea. Cool. So, did you see anything in terms of what episodes work really well for your audience or maybe for your business? Maybe it's not download numbers, but maybe, solo episodes. Oh my God, they're amazing to get people on your schedule, to hop on calls. Or did you see any of that?
Yes. So there's a couple of things I've noticed there. The more closely aligned I can make the topic with the next step, which sounds obvious, but you don't think about it when you're planning out topics. the easier it is. So if you want someone to join a program, if you want someone to get on a call about something, if you want someone to sign up for a specific lead magnet, thinking about what is the natural step that comes before that so you can easily lead into it has made it infinitely easier and more effective. I am very mindful of my titles. I want people to know what they're going to get out of it, but I also want there to be an element of curiosity. And I find when I kind of combine those two things, it works really well, gets a lot of listens, gets a lot of, responses from people. The other thing I would say is I think when I started, I was focused very much on practicalities. Like, here's how you do a thing, here's like steps to something. What have been really impactful episodes and just really impactful content in general across my business have actually been things that shift people's mindset. So moving them from, they think their problem is this thing, but their problem is actually this other thing. Or, you think you need this solution, but you actually need this solution. I have found those to be incredibly powerful in the sales process, but also in the impact because it allows people to realize the things that they didn't know they didn't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's very true. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I absolutely agree with your titles. Titles are important. It's difficult to hit that
Yeah.
balance, but very important in terms of listens. Also, wanted to share something that works really well for one of my clients currently. She does episodes when she has a new program or something that she's launching. She does episodes all about that program, and they get less downloads than her average episodes, but it's really quality over quantity for these episodes because the people that do listen to these episodes, they're so interested and they want that deep dive. So also something to, keep in mind when you're listening to this episode. Download numbers don't say everything, and it's also, Heidi, what you share. You're not 100% focus on download numbers, but also what it does for the business, right? Like what gets people to take that next step. So also when you're starting a podcast, make sure to keep that in mind, that what is your actual goal with this podcast? Heidi, you mentioned it's making an impact and also getting you a full roster with clients, of course. So for those goals, are downloads important? Yes, but it's not the most important thing, right? So yeah, just wanted to share that that works for my client currently very, very well, where it's not about the downloads, but it's really about who is listening and the information that she provides for those people.
That's so interesting. So does she do like a deep dive into the program when she's launching it?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just an episode, a solo episode, where she just talks them through exactly all the information about the program. So all the details, what they're going to learn, what they'll walk away with. I believe she also shares some case studies and stuff like that, but it's all about the program. And it's very obvious also from the title and everything that it's all about the program. So when you start listening, okay, I'm going to hear about this new program that she has. And yeah, like I said, not everyone is into it, but that's also fine. That's a decision that she makes. And yeah, it's not about the downloads, but it's about the conversions from those episodes.
Yeah, and to your point about case studies, something that has been really impactful on my podcast is having clients on and talk about their journey with like really a focus on them. Yes, they went through my program and we talk about that and we highlight that, but it's to show their progression. So it serves as a little bit of a sales tool and a little bit of inspiration. And those have been very popular episodes.
Oh, yeah. I can absolutely imagine, getting inspired by like what these people have done. That must be awesome for you, your business, and for the listener as well, right? That sounds
Yeah.
like a really good win-win. Amazing. Heidi, what advice would you give someone who is starting a podcast now in 2024?
don't fall into the trap of being like, I'm too late to start. You're not. You never are.
No.
Just start and accept that you will start imperfectly and that you may go back to your early episodes and you may cringe. And that's a good sign because it means you've gotten better. It means you've grown, that you can look back and be like, oh God, what was I doing? But you can't ever get to that point if you don't start and if you don't commit. I think commitment is a really big thing with podcasts. I used to publish every week. It got to be too much. I switched to every other week. That rhythm worked really well for me and it still does. And I didn't notice any real difference in the results I was getting. So if you feel like as you're doing this, like you're on this hamster wheel, keep in mind that, like, you're in control. You get to adjust. You get to make this work the way you want it to work. You can batch record a whole season. You can, switch up your frequency. But I think going into it with a commitment of, I'm going to stick with this, is one of the most important things that you can do because so much of what comes from my podcast is the fact that it is so established. And it's only so established because I just refuse to stop doing it. Like,
Yeah.
even when there weren't that many people listening, I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep doing this because this is what I've decided I'm going to do. I would also say choose your topic strategically so that it aligns with where you want to take people. Sometimes, yeah, if you want to go broader and you want to try to bring, more of an audience in with something, great. But don't skimp on those like really strategic. If I teach them this, they'll want to, take the next step with me because that is incredibly powerful. But yeah, commit and make full use of it. Like, it is a relationship building tool. It is a content machine that you can use and repurpose and reshare because most of us, for what we're recording, it's just as good now as it was a year ago. So don't let that content just die, turn it into other pieces of content, which, I mean, I could do more of for sure. I think there's so much we can be doing with what already exists instead of feeling like we have to be on this constant wheel of always coming up with something new. When a lot of times it's like, well, I haven't talked about this in 100 episodes. So I'm going to talk about this topic again in this new way with the knowledge I have from, all of the work I've done in between. I think there are a lot of ways to make it easy for yourself and more straightforward. And I would try to do as much of that as possible.
Yeah, definitely good advice. And it's so funny what you said. I think everyone who has been on this podcast has said that they cringe when they listen to their first episode.
That's a good
So,
thing.
yeah,
That's a good thing.
it is a good thing. Yeah, it shows that you've grown. Like you
Yeah.
said, that you just kept going, worked through that, learned so much, and then now that's why it is successful now, right? Because you have
Yep.
kept going. So I think that's amazing advice. Heidi, please tell us where people can find your podcast and your business, but especially your podcast in case people want to give it a listen and use it as an excellent example.
Yeah. So you can go to evolveyourweddingbusiness.com/podlink. That'll take you to any of the podcast players so you can have a listen. If you want to go to the main podcast page on my website, that's evolveyourweddingbusiness.com/podcast, where you'll be able to learn a bit more and see all the past episodes and all that good stuff. But don't feel like because like I have so many episodes that you're, just getting started and that's not good enough. It absolutely is. And the impact it can have on people, if it helps one person, isn't that worth it? That's the thing that always keeps me going.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your podcast journey with us today. I'll make sure to also add the links to the show notes. So when you're listening, you can just easily grab them there. Make sure to check out Heidi's podcast because I think we can learn a lot from her also from just listening to her content. Yeah, thank you again for being here, Heidi. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for listening. See you next week in the next episode. All right, that's it for today's episode. Need some help to get your podcast off the ground? Not sure where to start and what to focus on? Go to thepodcastbabes.com to schedule a call and learn more about our podcast launch and production services. See you next week.